Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we are reviewing Raiding the Obsidian Keep. So this is a new dungeon crawl adventure for old school D&D created by Joseph R. Lewis. Now, I've reviewed a number of his adventures in the past, and I think he is one of the best adventure writers working today. Certainly in the OSR, but probably overall in role-playing games. And his talent is not so much in creating these amazing settings that you're never going to forget or creating new rules that push the hobby forward in one way or another. He is simply extremely consistent in making adventures that are easy to run, that are easy to play, that are highly interactive. You can just pick up and go with them and have a really great time. He just has a fantastic grasp on what it is that makes adventure-based locations work, what makes them fun to play. He actually has a great YouTube channel where he has a whole video series walking through how he designs these, and I really recommend you check it out. Before we continue, though, a reminder that I am doing a giveaway for the month of July, where at the end of the month, I will be giving away these 3 books, which is the Japanese Rules Cyclopedia, a very rare and hard to find set of books, to one lucky person who is subscribed to the Questing Beast newsletter. If you're already subscribed to the newsletter, then you are already in the running to win these. But if not, head down to the description below, put in your email in the newsletter, and you will be ready to go. Also, I should point out that for a limited time, Knave 2nd Edition is on sale in PDF over at DriveThruRPG, along with a number of my other role-playing games. I'll put a link in the description below where you can check that out, as well as a link to a list that I made of a whole bunch of different products that are on sale for you to pick up during their big Christmas in July sale, which is going on, I think, until the end of this month. All right, what's going on inside Raiding the Obsidian Keep? Well, just like the previous books in this series by Joseph R. Lewis, the cover comes off and it works as a kind of GM screen or a reference guide where you can easily see all the different locations and see these kind of brief keys for how all the different rooms work all throughout the adventure. This is really nice for being able to reference things really quickly. There's some extra rumors that you can use here to give players a guide for where they might go and some clues to look out for. As I pointed out before, I'm kind of mixed on having these removable covers. It is nice to be able to quickly reference things, but on the other hand, it does make the book itself just feel not great. It's kind of floppy in your hand. It doesn't have a nice cardstock cover to hold it together and to protect it. I think overall, I would have preferred to have it still attached, but that's the way it is. Now, this book is a kind of deluxified version of the original. It's been expanded by the Merry Mushmen, who have created the zine collection Knock, which I reviewed in the past. It's got art by Leanne, layout by Oliver Revenue, maps by Rob Matthews and Nabok, and proofreading by Ava Islam. I like down here how it points out that Joseph R. Lewis is a great adventure writer because a lot of his adventures have been given the best by Bryce Lynch over at 10 Foot Pole, and isn't that the truth? I usually check those out every month when I summarize the best links from around the OSR in my newsletter. What I always check for first is what has been nominated as the best on 10 Foot Pole because Bryce Lynch is a great reviewer. All these adventures come with a brief introduction to the OSR for people who are not super familiar with it, some basic principles here, and some recommendations to check out Matt Finch's primer and the Principia Apocrypha, which I helped to contribute to. Here's our basic background. On the subterranean shores of the Sakine Sea stands the holy city of Radiant Vitella. In the center of the sea lies Ilsa Requia, where the lords of the Obsidian Keep, that's right here, harass passing ships with their magics. In the palace, Duchess Forza studied and mastered sorcery. Her husband, Duke Avito, grew jealous of her power. 1 year ago, the Archbishop of Radiant Vitella secretly sent the Red Priests of Vermesh to seduce and corrupt Duke Avito. That was basically an excuse so that he could attack and destroy the Obsidian Keep, which he did 2 weeks ago. He sends a fleet of holy warships to destroy the keep, but the fleet never returned. No one knows what happened to it. So what actually happened? For the last year, the Red Priests have been driving the Duke insane and causing everyone in the Obsidian Keep to develop bizarre chaos mutations. When the fleet attacked, Duchess Forza used her sorcery to battle the invaders. But Duke Avito wanted the glory of victory, so he sacrificed his youngest daughter, Bianca, to summon the immortal horror, Vermesh, into this plane of existence. This eldritch summoning caused a red storm of chaos, destroying the fleet and damaging the Obsidian Keep. Today, the shattered remains of the Radiant fleet lie in the harbor. The survivors flee on rafts or huddle in shelters on the beach. Inside the Obsidian Keep, the palace is a nightmare. Only a few people remain alive, all horribly mutated, and some possessing unholy powers. Duchess Forza lies mostly dead in the keep. Duchess Avito lies entirely dead in his private sanctum, but he is not alone. Meanwhile, the people of Radiant Vitella wonder what happened to their holy fleet. And that's where you come in. You're going to be investigating where the fleet went and discover this very horrific situation and hopefully profit out of it. There's a number of rumors that you might learn here. For example, that the Obsidian Keep was built in a single night by an army of demons in return for 1,000 souls. That one's false. But a true one might be, in the harbor, there is a beautiful octopus woman who eats human fingers. I really enjoy all of these illustrations. They're not too elaborate. They're kind of sketchy. They feel like a really talented artist sketching stuff as you're running the adventure. It gives you a nice impression of what things look like while allowing you to fill in details. Here's the initial harbor where the fleet was destroyed. So assuming that you get here by boat, it's going to drop you off, probably with a rowboat, and you're going to head inland. And the ship that drops you off is going to return every once in a while to pick you up. But if you don't show up after 5 days or so, it's probably going to assume that you're dead. So get to work and then get back with the loot and with the information. These initial areas are kind of like a point crawl. Really, you can ignore all of these if you want to and just go straight to the shore. But of course, there's interesting loot, there's NPCs to talk to, possibly allies to make, the more you interact with stuff. Each zone has a big list of D20 encounters that can happen. You're supposed to roll on this every time you move towards a new destination. So the more you hang out here, more stuff is going to happen. And it could be good or bad. For example, a raft floats by. 3 kettle crabs scuttle about on it, tearing open a body wearing a yellow jacket. Silver gleams in the dead sailor's hand, which is an angel fire grenade. All of our stat blocks are very terse. They're very easy to read. Like you got a skeleton with all your basic stats right there, rules for them being undead. Or you got a Vulgrain with some special abilities right here, like a dive attack. First attack is +2 to hit. Soaring Doom, 1 in 6 chance on each successful attack to snatch the target from the ground and toss them 30 feet away. Or there's loot. The bile of the Vulgrains is sought after by alchemists who make a beard oil of charming with it. 3 gold pieces per individual bile sack. Here's how each location is laid out, and it's really well done, same as in the previous books by this author. There's always a little bit of read aloud text there at the beginning, which is always just a couple of sentences and covers the most obvious stuff that you're going to see as you approach. At least most of the time. There's a couple cases where there's a little bits of information that's really more for the game master, which is a little unfortunate, but it's not too long, so it's easy to scan and make sure that you don't include any of that stuff. Inside each of the bits of read aloud text, there's often bolded text, and that bolded text is connected to a bullet point down here that goes into more detail about that. So for example, waves and sloshing debris echo in a narrow black cave on the cliff wall. Players say, we want to get closer to the black cave. Go right here. Too narrow for a boat, characters must climb along the narrow slippery ledges in the walls above the water. Sometimes the bullet points also have bolded text, and that tells you that there's even more detail that can be referenced further down. Whenever there is a kind of gray rectangle around something, that usually means it's a magic item, and there's lots of different fun magic items. For example, this one, the dim red glow of this magic lantern offers little light, but it clears away fog for 100 feet in all directions, which is useful on the harbor, but there are places in the actual castle itself where that could be extremely useful. Some of my favorite things about all of the adventures that this author writes is that things are very interconnected. So you mess around with things in one place and it affects things somewhere else, or something over here is useful over there. There's also a ton of interactivity where in almost every location that you visit, there is something to mess with. There's something to explore. There's something to collect. There's people to talk to. There's very rarely going to be any empty places. The world is there for you to loot and for you to investigate. And lastly, there is always a ton of variety. Every location has a totally new thing going on. It often ties into the main theme, but it's not a lot of repetitive encounters with the same sorts of things over and over. Now, once you get further into the actual castle itself, you're going to see more certain types of villains are going to start reoccurring, but the locations themselves often have just new things to interact with. So the more you explore, the more types of challenges that you're going to run into, which is something that I like a lot. So here's like a giant colossus in the side of a cliff where you can see that its hand has snapped off and fallen into the ocean. And inside its hand is a golden staff. How are you going to get it out? Well, that's really up to you. You could just take a hammer and just bash at it for long periods of time. That'll probably allow you to get it out. But if you're in a hurry, you're going to have to get a little bit more clever. Like maybe you have a rock to mud spell, for example, or maybe you find some sort of grease that can help you slide it out faster. Creative solutions are always going to be good. And coming up with those creative solutions are rewarded. If you actually manage to find a way to get this staff out, it's going to be enormously effective all throughout the castle itself because there's a lot of chaos creatures in here, and that thing is going to banish them from existence if you manage to touch them. We'll see more of that further on, where there are often parts of the adventure that have clearly been built in to make things much easier for the players if they manage to solve it. It's usually not easy to activate or to find these shortcuts, but it's very gratifying if you manage to do it. It's definitely not the kind of adventure that demands that you solve things one particular way, that you take one certain path, that you find this item and you have to use it like this. He just provides tools and then lets players get creative with how they're going to use them. If players find a way to cheat or somehow circumvent parts of his adventure, that's actually a good thing. You can tell from the way the author has written this adventure. You can move further up the beach here. Lots of different encounters possible on the beach. And similar to the lagoon before it, there's lots of different people that you can talk to and things to investigate. Or, you can just bypass everything if that's what you want to do. There's a big river of lava running all the way down here from the castle because lava is now leaking out from under the castle and spilling out over the nearby landscape. As you explore, you also start finding different people and factions that are going to be more present in this adventure. For example, you might find more normal people and fishermen whose houses have been destroyed by the lava stream, and you can help them out in different ways. But you might also find people from the castle itself, servants or courtiers and people like that, who all have weird mutations because they've been exposed to the forces of raw chaos for so long over the last year as the Duke has done his weird experiments. Here's a great little location, a stone arch. High on the cliff, a stone arch curves over a dim cave. Ancient markings cover the stones. There is no path up there. There are markings in Old Common. Keep out! Danger! It was very hard to kill him. Leave him dead, please. This is the tomb of a wizard that was sealed away long ago. The Duchess in the castle has actually already taken his skull and is using it for her own ends, but there are bits and pieces of him still left around. On the lid of the sarcophagus it says, "Here lies Prospero, long may he rot. He dabbled in magic, and look what he got." Hidden in the dusty bone fragments in the sarcophagus, there's a platinum ring, nice and valuable, and a glass eye. The glass eye has a little bit of the wizard still in it, so you can touch the eye to an object or a creature, and his voice booms from nowhere, identifying or explaining it with a dripping sarcasm and obvious prejudice once per day. There's a lot of magic items in here, so it's really nice to be able to identify things, and there's character added to it too. The more people you talk to, the more of a sense you get of what actually went on at the castle, and you can make lots of allies as well. There's plenty of different creatures and people who can start following you as you raid this keep, and you're going to need all the help that you can get. As you approach the castle, you can see that it's right on the edge of this very tall cliff. You're going to head at it from this angle. There's lava leaking from the ground in cracks all over the place, and there's some really cool visuals that have been baked into this scene to make it more memorable. For example, because of the chaos storm that's been raging around here, it is raining constantly, but just around the castle in a kind of Eeyore cloud. This could affect things like visibility and footing, and it's also going to affect the inside of the building as well as the flooding has moved inside. Fun new types of monsters like cinder shrimp that are jumping out of these cracks in the ground, obsidian skeletons, flailing masses of a dozen human bodies fused together by terrible heat and rampant chaos. There's a floating cottage that is just floating in the middle of the courtyard, slowly tumbling in midair. If you find a way to get up to it, and there is no listed way to do that, you'll just have to figure it out for yourself, which I love. You can find things like a black leather jacket, which is striking, sexy, and cool. All of the wearer's reaction rolls are coin tosses. Heads, total success. Tails, horrific failure. The layout actually starts in the basement, which I was a little confused at first because you don't start by going into the basement. You start on the main floor, but it just lists it from basement all the way up to the highest point. And then the highest point of the castle, the upper floor, is really the end point. That's where all of the really big bosses and the end game stuff happens. So you might be tempted to head straight up there, but of course, the more you explore, the more interesting stuff that you're going to find. And some of the monsters you're going to find inside are quite dangerous. This is rated for levels 2 through 4, which seems about right to me, but it can be quite deadly unless you have brought a significant number of people to help out. For example, you got red priests right here who have a spirit claw, an invisible arm, because one of their arms is always missing, that can numb you and prevent you from doing anything. It's got phantom parry, where it can grab weapons away from you and parry them to reduce damage. And 1/3 of the time when they die, they're actually going to burst into a visceral corruption, which are even more dangerous. Visceral corruptions are human bodies that have been exploded and inverted into a spider-shaped abomination. And they're so horrible looking that if you fail a save versus paralysis, you'll be too scared to do anything for 1d4 rounds, which can be really deadly. If you're just frozen there, it's going to start munching on your face. You can climb on the walls and ceilings, and if you try and slice it up with bladed weapons, it just divides into more of them that keep fighting you. There's also lovely horrors, which are insane aristocrats that have major animal mutations. And they are very seductive. Anyone who hears them must save versus spells or be seduced, and they can't do anything against them until they save again. However, once you figure out how that works, you might find a way to negate that ability by maybe stopping up your ears with earwax, Odysseus style. One fun thing about the cellar is that the lava is leaking out of the floor everywhere, creating a literal the floor is lava situation. One way to negate this is if you come down from this stairway right here, if you open this door, a lot of the water that's on the first floor is going to rush down the stairs and cool the lava, at least temporarily. But if you enter from another direction, like maybe from over there, you're not going to have that solution. There's situations in here where there's all these pillars with rings attached. So you can swing from rings like from monkey bars to try and avoid the lava. Over here, there's already a lot of water in here. So the water is very hot and boiling all the time, creating this really dense fog that makes it almost impossible to see anything and very difficult to find this secret door at the back of it. That lantern from earlier that clears away fog would be perfect for that situation. You can find a weapon that freezes things, investigate a chapel where there's an angel who will bless you and make you better at fighting certain types of monsters. Plenty of cells full of weird characters that you can talk to. For example, in cell 7, there's a woman just doing one-handed chin-ups, and she is a ducal soldier. If you release her, she really wants to fight those red-robed freaks, and she's going to run off and just do that. I kind of like that because it allows you to bring her back later as a side character. Like you wander into a room and she's already in there stabbing one of the red priests to death. I think that's just a lot of fun. At the very back of all the cells is a black pit where there is a vampire who's been starved almost to death. Down there at the bottom, you can just see 2 red pinpricks for eyes. This is one of those situations where you can really change things to your advantage if you play your cards right. Because if you rescue her and you feed her enough blood, right? How many people are going to intentionally feed blood to a vampire? But if you do that, she'll become powerful enough to waste most of the enemies in this keep, take it over and start ruling it as her kingdom. And, you might become some really high-powered henchmen for her. But I suspect that most players will probably either not find her or be way too suspicious of her to ever try doing that. This is the first floor and is mostly flooded with water. There is a lot of notes that say if this water is struck by lightning, then people take damage. However, I couldn't find an actual system for saying when lightning strikes. There is a rainstorm going on outside. Maybe if the players bring their own lightning, if they're casting lightning spells or something, maybe that's what's referring to. But it would be neat if every once in a while you heard thunder roar and like the lightning struck and then everyone was zapped if you were in the water. The palace is absolutely full of all of these weird, corrupted aristocrats, which oftentimes aren't necessarily hostile to you, which is fun because that lets you talk to them and try and get information out of them. But oftentimes, they do want you dead or they want to eat you or they have a weird goal. If you do fight them, you run the risk of them transforming into one of these horrific mutated things that crawl out of their bodies because they have all these red worms growing out of their skin. And then you have to fight that. So be very careful when you interact with these guys or you're going to get into a mess of trouble. There's some great, really well signposted traps, like in the Scorched Solarium. Soaring oval windows stand cracked into dozens of jagged shifting panes. Scorch marks slice across the walls at wild angles. Burnt pieces of tables and chairs bob in the standing water. Beside a glittering golden globe, a body lies on a fainting couch, breathing wetly. So each turn, a pane of glass shifts in the wind, and a blinding flash of light refracts throughout the room like a laser, just zapping everything. So you can clearly see how this trap works. You can wander in and just hope to not get hit, but if you can see that this is all being caused by these moving panes of glass, if you shatter them all, well, now the trap is deactivated. But there's a lot of glass in here. How are you going to do that? There's a menagerie full of magical creatures, like you have a bitter harpy, a phoenix firebird, you have an actual siren. There is a wingless blue dragon, an orb weaver, and a rubbish sphinx. Some of these are incredibly helpful if you manage to make allies with them and take them through the rest of the dungeon. Some of them are totally useless. Some of them even give you little quests. Like if you find this siren and you take her back down the beach and put her back into the ocean, she'll sing a single note that will have the hit points of all of the rest of the chaos horrors, which is going to be real nice. There's a bunch of different closets right here, and I like how instead of just being full of random junk, each one has a 1 in 6 chance of there being just a strange little scene going on inside that you see as soon as you open the door. For example, you might open the tool closet and you see a lovely horror quietly lecturing an assembly of red maggots. You open the door, you just see that, and then you probably just, close that door again. It is really nice how anytime a room has anything dangerous inside, that's immediately flagged at the beginning of the description before even the read aloud text. It's always really annoying when a book has something dangerous in a room and then they hide it in the text or even put it at the end. If it's something that the players would immediately notice and want to react to, you got to put that thing absolutely at the beginning. Level 2 has a lot of the fancy suites and bedrooms where each one is full of a weird thing going on, usually with these aristocrats. Most of the rooms, especially ones near the outside, have been damaged by thunder and lightning, so there's a 1 in 6 chance of ceilings or walls collapsing. There is a good amount of verticality throughout it as well. It does keep track of which rooms are on top of other rooms, because there's a lot of rooms where the floor is rotted or damaged, and on a bad roll, or if you're not playing your cards carefully, you can crash straight through the floor into the room below. And look at some of these magic items. These blue eggs break an egg on a creature to create a lifeless clone of that creature, right? So it doesn't move. It looks like it's just dead, but it's an identical copy of something. In order to make that useful, you're going to have to think. You're going to have to get creative with that. And that's what a good magic item should be doing. You can find this weird plague doctor who's already there ahead of you, and he can join your party, but he's also very interested in all of these chaos creatures, so he's always getting distracted and wandering off and messing around with them, which can trigger more mutations and making things worse for you. I love how every room just has a lot of detail in it. Look at all of these bullet points, but it's so well organized that it's not a pain to use. This is a great adventure for people who love to poke around. And I love to poke around, so this is right up my alley. I want a nice description of what's in the room, then I want to say, I want to go over to that thing. What's underneath it? What's behind it? If I lift this thing up, is there anything there? And this adventure says, yes, that is awesome. We're going to actually support that by just giving you lots of detail. Some of it isn't necessarily going to be useful, but it's all there. The location feels like a real tactile place that stands up to close inspection. I love how there's plenty of these precarious encounters where you encounter some people who aren't immediately hostile, but could become hostile very quickly. Like here's a rival adventuring party that's already found 3,500 gold pieces. And they're not your enemies, but if you try and take it from them, they will try and shank you. This could turn into a great extended encounter where you join forces with them, you sneak around with them, and then when their backs are turned, you stab them in the back and take their loot. Or maybe they do that to you first. At the top of the castle is the bedrooms of the royal family, so the Duke, the Duchess, and their children. These rooms are much harder to get into. You really have to bash the doors down, which is probably going to cause random encounters, or they are actually trapped and are going to harm you unless you're real careful. Also, it rewards exploration, because the more you've explored, the more of these magic items, and especially these circlets that you've found from the different members of the royal family, many of whom are dead or badly injured. And if you find these, it's going to be much easier to investigate. For example, if you're wearing the royal circlet for this room, then the traps simply don't even fire at you. Investigate the Duchess's room. You can find some of her magic spells and her spell books, which is going to be great for any kind of wizard. You can find these magically charged spheres, which are like little electric balls. You plug them to different things in her room and different things activate, which might just be fun at first, but you can also unlock even more treasure if you really experiment enough. You can even find her mostly dead body, the result of her spell which destroyed the fleet that was invading her island, and answer her questions. If you answer them in a way that she likes, she will just gratefully crumble to dust. But if you tell her that the area is destroyed and that her children are gone, she screams, a red bolt of lightning destroys her body, deals 2d6 damage to everyone near her, save versus breath to take half damage, and sends her staff flying out into the sea. Now, if you go into the Duke's room, you can actually find a portal that will take you to his secret sanctum, where his ritual was underway. So he's actually dead, but he has partially killed his youngest daughter in an effort to summon this demon worm from another dimension. Now, how you want to deal with this is really up to you. If you listen to the whisperings of Vermish, the evil worm, then you can push the knife all the way into her body, finally killing her and completing the sacrifice. This will release him into the world. It will give you the void flesh blessing, which frankly isn't very good, and he will cause unknown havoc throughout the land. On the other hand, you can save her by pulling it out of her body. This will sacrifice your arm because he will appear and bite your arm off, but this will also end the sacrifice and finally throw him back to where he came from. It'll also give you the crystal knife, which is pretty cool. It's an ancient magic blade that's a tooth of one of the seraphim. It can pierce anything in the universe, but it only does 1d4 damage. So again, a creative weapon. It doesn't do much damage, but you can slice and carve up whatever you want. What could you even do with that? I love thinking about that. There's a little epilogue here explaining what's going to happen after the adventure, if you defeat Vermish, or if you don't defeat him, or if either the Princess Viola or Bianca survives based on your actions, and what's probably going to happen regardless. That's nice, so you can see these long-term effects that might ripple through your campaign world if you plop this into a world that you're already running. Some nice appendixes at the back explaining all the different people and places in case you forgot, and as usual, an appendix of all the magic items in the adventure put into one convenient area. That's really nice because you might forget what it does and you might not know which page it was on, so you can find it here really quickly. And because it's an OSR adventure, your characters are probably going to die a lot. So here's a whole appendix just for replacement characters. If your PC dies, you can grab a new one. Like you might get replaced by a halfling cook that woke up on the beach after the shipwreck, and you decide to go on a life of adventure and explore this keep. Or you might end up as a living suit of armor that's been animated inside the palace, and now you're just a PC. Or to get even weirder, you might be a Grey, an alien that was taken as a slave by a space vampire and freed when her teleportation spell to Earth was miscast. They look for a way home, posing as a halfling with a weird accent. So that's it for raiding the Obsidian Keep. As usual with Joseph R. Lewis's adventures, I liked it quite a lot. It was a lot of fun to read. It was fun to find all of those surprises inside it, and I would be absolutely glad to run this adventure. It's an adventure for game masters who love seeing what their players are going to do and how they're going to react to all these strange situations and what they're going to make of it. It's an adventure for players who love thinking outside the box, who love struggling and finding their own way to their own destinations. And so this is right up my alley. Absolutely loved it. As usual, I will put links in the description where you can pick this up if you want to buy a copy of it for yourself, and also links to Joseph R. Lewis's YouTube series if you want to see his advice on how to create adventures like this one. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.